Scientific method as applied to social sciences include a variety of research approaches, tools and techniques for collecting and analyzing qualitative and quantitative data. They include laboratory experiments, field surveys, case research, anthropographic research, action research, and so forth. In these 7-day long FDP, our eminent speakers would enlighten you on the various aspects associated with social science researches. Now, as Rishita ma'am had already instructed you yesterday, would leave a small note of instructions again for all our participants. The platform we are using is Cisco WebEx. The entire program is being recorded. All participants are requested to keep themselves on mute mode during the entire course of the program. Use the chat box for your questions, please. E-certificates will be awarded to the participants who will attend all the sessions, submit all assignments within stipulated time, and complete all necessary formalities, including the submission of the feedback form. Now, for today's program, we have 3 eminent panelists. Straight away, without much ado, going to the technical session, our first speaker today is Professor Dr. Ramanuja Ganguly. Professor Ganguly is with the Department of Sociology, West Bengal State University, Bharasat, from 2009 since its very inception. Before that, he was also associated with Helpage India, taught in Maharani Kashi Shori College, Kolkata, along with 2 other temporary engagements with the Bardhaman and the Jadavpur University. He has 7 books to his credits, published 20 papers, and numerous presentations in various seminars and conferences. His interests include concept, theory, and thought in sociology, sociology of religion, Indian social issues and problems. He had also proven his administrative acumen by being the officiating registrar of West Bengal State University for about 1.5 years. He has been associated with various sociological associations at the national level and beyond. Today, he will be speaking on, quoting his paper title, Moving from a Question of Common Sense to a Question of Research, Framing Research Objectives and Questions, asking a very dear friend and an eminent scholar to grace the occasion. Over to you, Professor Ganguly.
Thank you, Kolkata. Thank you, Dilip Babu. Thank you, Mitali. Thank you, Babu, for this kind invitation. I hope I am audible. I am reasonably audible to all of you. And this is a medium that we are doing for the first time, so maybe I may be a little clumsy, but I think I can do with it. And as you can see from the indicative title that my presentation would include today, is that moving from a question of common sense to a question of research. Every researcher, when they start working, they face this question, or they have a problem. They have a problem, but how to frame that problem into a question format, and how to bring that question out of the common sense, out of the intuition of an individual to a platform which can become a part of their own research. So first segment that I would like to talk about is how to ask a research question. Now, when I'm saying asking a research question or how to ask a research question, I mean that every question that we ask are not research questions. They are questions, they are issues of interest, but they are not research questions. On the surface, it may seem rather simple to ask questions. And to some extent, this is correct. After all, we all know the words that we use to begin a question that who is it, or what is it, or where is it, or why am I supposed to do something, or why something is happening, or when it is happening, or how it is happening. But learning to ask questions is very important, as I have understood for teaching more than 2 decades, that one has to distinguish between asking questions and asking research questions, and how that distinction we will proceed with that. I have always seen my scholars, my students perplexed as to how to frame the question. So the distinction is crucial, because if we are not asking discipline-specific research questions, then the answers and explanations that result will also be non-specific. The non-specific explanations are all too common in our society. Their defining feature is that they have a singular focus and on the individual and corresponding disregard for structural dimensions of the issue. So on an individual level, we are trying to explain. So non-specific explanations routinely blame individuals for their actions instead of pointing out to the larger external factors, the extraversial factors that are there in our life. Now, certainly, we all have our intuition, we all have our intuitive beliefs, we all have our subjective understanding about people's behavior, thoughts, and feelings. And these beliefs are collectively referred to normally, technically, a folk belief. Now, often it is observed that if a belief is widely shared, especially if it is endorsed by experts, and you find that your intuition or your subjective understanding is being corresponded by the experts, we tend to assume that what we assume is true. This is compounded by the fact that when we tend to focus on cases that confirm our intuitive beliefs or subjective understanding and not on cases that disconfirm them, this is what we call confirmation bias. For example, I'll give you certain examples, then you will understand what is a confirmation bias. Once we begin to believe, suppose, once we begin to believe that women are more talkative than men, we tend to notice and remember talkative women and the silent men, but ignore or forget silent women and talkative men. We also hold incorrect beliefs in part because it would be nice if they were true. Like another example, if I give you, that we always assume that dieting will allow us to lose weight. So obesity becomes an issue in today's world where we have lifestyle diseases. So obesity, to counter obesity, we have believed for a very long time that dieting would help. And scientific evidence has shown that they are not true. People may continue to believe the effectiveness of dieting in part because it gives them hope of losing weight if they are obese, or makes them feel good about their self-control. Yet, scientific research doesn't prove it. If I give you another example to show that how our intuition actually does not suffice to go for a research, some people believe that no one would confess to a crime if he or she has committed unless perhaps you use physical force on them. But extensive empirical research again shows that false confessions are surprisingly very common, and they occur for a variety of reasons. So there is no reason to imagine that physical force would yield truth, and otherwise it will not give you the truth. Similarly, we always imagine that if we scream, or if we can throw objects, or if we throw a punch, our anger would subside. But it is seen by research that it is not true. In fact, the anger increases. So what I'm trying to give you a very commonplace example and trying to tell you that the intuitions, the intuitive beliefs that we have, that okay, these are truths, these are facts, are not always true when research upon them are done. Now, I will come to more into social science as to show that how our understanding can change the moment our level of research or working of research becomes clear or conceptual framework becomes clear or theoretical support from our discipline comes to us. Say, for example, when we talk of violence between husband and wife or intimate partner violence, what we normally hear that when we hear that there is violence between husband and wife, the first question people ask that why didn't she leave the husband? Or why did she stay in the relationship that was physically or emotionally abusive? Questions such as these put the blame squarely on the shoulder of the individual, that the woman should have left so that violence couldn't have occurred. So the issue is not that subtle. Issue is not so that she should not have allowed it to happen. Actually, we have to ask the question as social scientists in a little different way. That why did one person think it was appropriate to abuse another? Or what is about our society that makes intimate partner violence or violence among husband and wife so common? Or do we lack structural support like the legal, financial, familial, occupational, or educational support for which it leads to individuals continuing to stay in an unhealthy situation? Or there are also coming out of your marriage as a victim of violence, domestic violence. So these are questions, social science research questions that shift our focus, implicit blame on individual. We shift from an implicit blame from an individual victim to the larger social structure, to the larger social milieu, and try to understand. Okay, let me take an example from education because since the organizers are mostly from the Department of Education, one of our biggest complaints these days, I also often read or maybe some hear about is students' lack of academic motivation. The question that inevitably arise in these discussions are focused directly on students. Why don't students today want to learn? Why are the students disengaged? Why do they just seem to go through the motions? Why are they not interested in reading text? Rather, they are interested in texting in classes and they are not interested about what is being taught. These questions actually make us assume that we are opposed to learning and we assume that the students of this generation are opposed to learning. They don't want to learn. And often there is a negative image making, construction of a negative image of the students. So there is a this denigrating statements that are made about the students. However, it will be more relevant if we ask the right research question that why should the students want to learn today when we have so many other sources of learning? What aspects of educational process encourage them to be engaged, excited as motivated learners? What kind of course should we design? Or we also might wonder how they have been socialized to not want to learn, how to reject their natural inclination for curiosity and exploration. So maybe the socialization process in today's world has made them less curious because everything they find to be given or prescribed or often told as not to be done, only to be done what is prescribed. So instead of assuming there is something wrong with the generation of students of today, it is important to attempt to pinpoint the educational structure, the kind of books that we prescribe, the kind of syllabus that we make, and try to find out that if there are certain impediments in them which discourage the intellectual inquisitiveness among the students of today, or they are not interested, why they are not interested, what is there in the syllabus that may do not make them engaged, do not ask them to be engaged in learning. Now, if I look at from the economic side of education, some prevalent questions that we come, and we come to our next area, that is college is for everyone, college learning or going to the college, investing to the college. Are we letting too many people into the college who just can't afford to be there? Are the students better off bypassing the high cost of college and training, enrolling into vocational training? These are very important issues that one must think. Now, from a researcher's perspective, these sorts of questions that we often ask that is it that they should go to the college? They're problematic in two accounts. First, they fail to question the why cost of college has increased so dramatically in last say 20 years or 30 years. Has the public expenditure for higher education have not come close to keeping pace with the rising prices? The second problem with such typical questions about the student cost and whether or not it should be accessible to everyone is that these sort of questions have some sort of not so subtle biases of caste, gender, class. So these are the undertones of biases that lead you to question like that. If college becomes more selective to only few, then low income, lower caste, and women would largely be the ones who will be excluded. These individuals would not just miss out on the opportunity to attend college. Additionally, they would miss out on one of the main opportunities for the upward social mobility. Even today, even though we begin with a typical individual-based questions, but before answering, it follow it up with another question or two, starting with the words why or who or how. Now, for example, we the teachers uh, often think that what will be the outcome of teaching because the results would not much vary, or what might we try to do differently in our teaching, that is in terms of curriculum, infrastructure, assessment, expectations in the classroom, etc. Or what indicators we need to look at that we have to do things differently so that we can get desired results. However, one needs to think continually and ask that what what exactly would I like students to write properly, or how students don't seem to know the structure of correct writing and how should they learn? These are important questions, and or what teaching strategies that will help the students recognize the gaps and mistakes. Now, we often seem to assume, for example, when we talk of examination, the three common things that we always assume that more time, if more time is given for examination test, then the student would get higher marks or higher score. They can score more. Or in these days, I often hear that if the students are not asked to write, if they are given a computer to appear for their test, they would score more. Or we also hear that entrance exam score
স্যার
does not. Hello.
স্যার মাইক একটু সামনে নেবেন, একটু কথা ক্লিয়ার আসছে।
Okay. Entrance exam scores are not actually very strong predictors of college success. Now, for example, when we talk of examination, what we have heard or what the type of assumptions that we normally see, the beliefs that people have is completely negated by the research findings. So research questions, therefore, becomes very important. What I was trying to do by giving you all these examples, that where we are intuitively wrong when we contrast it with the research, and how we can put out questions differently so that they become the same intuition, as the same belief, that same understanding, subjective understanding of an individual can become a research question if it is framed in a different way if it is looked in a different way. So research questions need to consider the structural dimension and the social context of the issue and strive to understand the bigger picture. We need to ask such questions because the individual-based, victim-based, victim-blaming questions that are typical in our society do not tell us the full story. One way to do this is to ask yourself, when you as a researcher are planning to undertake a research, you may ask yourself a few questions like, what are the possible causes? If you have taken up an issue, suppose say you are talking in terms of HIV or talking in terms of say drug abuse, or say you are talking in terms of trying to do a research in terms of post-COVID fallout on a particular community, particular group, or particular type of dressing behavior, or particular type of occupation. So you can ask yourself, what are the possible causes of the behavior or a characteristics? And next you can ask yourself, what are some possible effects of the behavior or characteristics? What types of people might exhibit more or less the behavior or characteristics? What type of situation might elicit more or less the behavior and characteristics? So next I turn to finding a research question. Some social science, since social science is a very broad term, and it can be considered as a canopy for all the disciplines of social sciences. So it is very difficult not very easy, it's a little confusing to figure out if what we are proposing or writing is actually research and not mere factual journalistic inquiry. Research questions, especially in social science, are questions that examine the social meaning and patterns of a phenomenon. The key here is that it has to be social, involving groups rather than individuals. The explanation level, the scale, the level should be at the level of the community, level of the group, level of the society. And it has to address the patterns and meaning that are established among the people, not on individuals. So ask a question concerning differences between individuals, groups, roles, relationships, societies, and time periods. Remember, no comparison. If you do not draw comparison, you will get less information. Next, ask a question that cannot be simply answered in yes or no. Please do not ask a question that gives you yes/no answer. A proper question, a research question, should suggest a debate that is still open. A question that can be answered definitively once and for all is not likely to be a very interesting question for social science research. Next, ask a question that has more than one possible answer. Your task is to make a case for your position. What position you take about a particular research issue. Depending on that, it is your task to make your case, make all the arguments in your favor. You can only do this effectively if the other possible positions are real, viable, alternatives. Avoid making your argument by setting up a imaginary kind of a debate where even if somebody has not proposed that position or has not proposed an alternative position, you assume that that person is saying. So you are taking a theoretical position that is not real. So avoid such ghost fighting on a theoretical plane, even if that person's theory doesn't fit it. So just to make a good show of your own research, there is no need to show off someone else who actually is not speaking of something like that you are arguing. So make sure the data on your question, that there is data, you can find information, you can draw information from the society, from the community, from the group. This is important because if data is not available and subsequently you find that you are unable to provide the data, then what will happen? that your research will not proceed and you have to do an alternative something. So make sure your question is answerable, and do not make your research question so large that it is not possible for you to draw all the answers within the space. Suppose you are doing PhD, so it should be PhD level question only, which you can answer within a thesis, within the breadth of a thesis. Not that you will need 3 theses to answer your research question. So depending upon what kind of work you are doing, you need to decide as to what kind of question you are going to ask. So even if you may have numerous questions, it doesn't mean that you need to ask them, because it depends, you will be able to answer it or not. It depends on what kind of work that you are doing. So making your argument, how to make your argument strong so that you can establish your position. Making a research argument involves selecting and prioritizing the key factors or causes. Key factors or causes from a multitude of possible factors and causes. There may be many factors, but focus on your argument. Your argument should be on key factors and you prioritize them. The research question in which you argue that everything under the sun is related to your problem is particularly not informative. It will not yield much information. Your work will not be that worthy. Instead, your task is to simplify a complex reality by telling the reader or the evaluator which factors or causes are most important for a given phenomenon. You should focus that you should tell the reader, you should tell your audience that what is most important here in your proposed research work, and which is the crucial or the key element that you are trying to rely upon to do your explanation. So you tell the reader, you tell your evaluator that it is the most important, which is the most important thing. You tell the reader that this is the most important thing that you are trying to explain. It is not your task to give an exhaustive explanation. So please do not feel obliged that you should talk about everything. You should tell us everything about whatever issue that is involved in your research. You only prioritize your own area, and based on that, you decide upon your question. It is your task to convince the readers or the evaluators as to what is the most central key element. In general, strong claims are preferable to weak ones. So if you make numerous weak claims, it will not give us a good impression about your research. Rather, if you only make one small, very strong claim that this is your finding, that is good enough. So do not feel shaky, do not feel scared that you do not have many questions. You have few questions, but you have very strong questions, and you can logically connect them to the central areas, the key themes involved in the issue of your research. Next, however, if your claim is too strong for you to defend with believable evidence, you better squarely defend it with available evidence. You should not use other things but evidence for your research logic, for your research explanation. Use facts, use figures, use statistics, use qualitative analysis, use data in every form from other researchers as well as from your own research. So when you are using other researchers to support your points, don't just recite them. Please do not only tell them that so and so has said this or so and so has said this. So what you do is show evidence that what they have said actually supports your claim, or it gives you an strength to your argument. So depending on your question, you may want to introduce or refute counter arguments or alternative explanations. This strengthens your claims. Before anybody tells that, okay, you are saying this is your finding from your research, However, I have read this paper and X has stated something different. So instead somebody else pointing out, you can always say that instead of others telling you, you can come up with the counter argument. You can say that you might be thinking that my thesis isn't true because X has told you something different in his paper or write-up. Well, let me tell you that this is why it's true that despite X has said this, my argument or my findings are also true. So before you say this, before others can say, point out, you can always take the alternative argument and refute the argument. And by eliminating alternative explanations, you are actually keeping the reader, keeping the evaluator, the listener of your research interested about what you are finding. So even if somebody else is saying something different, please believe me, despite X, I am better or my arguments are better suited and I know what I am talking about. So while the process of working out your argument is happening, you will find it to be very messy, very complicated, and you may find to be extremely difficult time. But the presentation of your argument, so when you are working out with your argument, it will be very messy. But when you present your argument, it should not be at all messy. It should be very clear cut and precise. In other words, avoid writing detailed blow by blow as to how your thought process worked while you were working out your argument. Don't give the details about how you came to your argument. Rather, in writing, you begin where you ended in thought with a clean, concise statement of your argument. You then use your argument to guide and structure the research. So I have picked up this issue of research question for the simple reason that this is the most strategic point where your research future depends. If you properly argue your research question, if you can establish your research question, if your research question is very clear, then what happens, your research is made already halfway through. The rest of the part will follow suit because depending on how you are arguing your case, your research will get strong. Now, there are certain strategies as to how you will establish your argument. At an early stage, it is necessary to determine if the proposed research is applicable. That is, it will actually help to tackle problem that has been identified. Whether it is relevant, whether it is urgent, whether it is feasible, whether it is acceptable, it is politically and ethically acceptable, and it avoids duplicating existing research. So if you are not doing something, you must decide as to if your research is getting into a new foray or making a new foray, or it is trying to establish something which is repetitive, because that will give the interest to your research and that will make things interesting, important. Because how relevant, how urgent, how visible, how acceptable it will be is a very important determinant point. So that's a strategy that you can use as to how. Whether the research you are using is qualitative or quantitative or mixture of both. If your question is about establishing a relationship, then your argument will generally involve adjudicating contradictory findings. When you are trying to establish a relationship, then your argument will generally, what will it will do? It will resolve contradictory places, standing contradictory findings. You will find research that both supports and contradicts the existence of the relationship that you are assessing. So there are X and Y variables. If you are trying to find a relationship between the two variables, you will find that a relationship exists Some will contradict, some will support. But you have to adjudicate, you have to find a resolution to all this. So you must first decide, based on all the evidence you have reviewed, where you come down on the issue. What is your stand? Are you persuaded that the positive relationship exists? Are you convinced that X and Y a relationship exists? You then systematically make a case in support of your position, citing the relevant findings as your evidence. You will also discuss. So no point making tables and just telling that this is the data is telling. So you have to adduce support for your question, adduce support for your research through the evidence that you have drawn while you have collected data. So you will discuss the findings that contradict your position, explaining why you find them less credible. Why will you not give it much credence? So eliminating alternative explanations is an important component of making or convincing research argument. So if the task here is to provide a possible explanation for an event, the relevant evidence may be more institutional or structural than statistical in nature. So we normally think if we make a statistical table or if we make a few equations, a few models, then we will do a better better explanation. It is not always true. So in social science, it is very important that we have to bring out the relevant evidence which is more institutional or structural in nature. And then we have to accomplish this task is that we have to show the relationship between the various variables and give the mechanism as to how the relationship works, how they are connected in the society. Only then we will be able to explain. Depict the lived experience. Bring it from the lived experience of the people, a common person's experience, and analyze the cultural meaning, the twist that is localized and culturally defined, how our values guide us, and how we are going to explain it. So it may be understudied, it may be unstudied, it may be overstudied, but nevertheless, in a well-studied group, but you make your arguments about the group in a fashion which has remained unexplained and unexplored. Take a common day daily experience and place it in the research. Say for example, if we are talking of parenting practices as and the level of educational attainment of children, and we may find that parental practices and educational attainment of children are very well researched area, but you may talk in terms of how parental class, the class of the parents, how the advantage of the class of the parents also get reflected in the opportunities that children get. So we have to think in terms of how we can connect common day experiences with our research. Say, for example, if we talk of impact of X on Y group of people. For example, say people whose parents are have suffered or have experienced incarceration, have been jailed for some reason or other, their children, and those parents who have not gone through the experience of being jailed or incarcerated. So what happens to their children? So you can always explain in terms of them and compare them and take. I just gave you an offhand example. Take a group of or social phenomena and separate them into categories. So you are talking of, say, suppose you are talking of the priests. So when you are talking of the priest becomes an homogeneous category. So in society, homogeneous category is a problematic area. So you need to segregate, you need to make separate categories within a single category. So that is also an important aspect. Or at times you need to lump, you need to split as well as bring them together. So your two groups studied separately deserve to be studied together as well. So even if there are two separate groups living in two separate regions, two separate places, suppose you are talking of a tribal group of Purulia and of a tribal group of, say Madhya Pradesh, you may find them to be similar. So you can, though they are separate, though they are different categories, you can put them in separate categories. However, you may find it necessary for your research that you can lump them together. It's called lumping in social research. So you can lump them together and try to do an analysis. So such strategies always evolve when you make your argument. So assess the state of research through your literature review and discuss the areas, point out the areas that are necessary for you to think in terms of your own research. Now, once I have come through this long, I hope I have been getting across the message that I'm trying to convey. And I will now come to my last section, that is the research objectives. But how do we frame, how do we bring our research objectives in such a precise fashion so that our research is completed without any hassle? Now, what is research objective? Research objective should be closely related to the statement of the problem and summarize what you hope it will be achieved through your study. So, for example, if the problem identified is of low utilization of, say, mother's care or say hospital services, the general objective of the study could be to identify the reason that why the hospital care is not sufficient, and in order to find ways to improving it. Now, research objectives describe concisely what research is trying to achieve, what you are trying to achieve through your research. The research objectives actually summarize the accomplishments of the researcher wishes to achieve. So what you want to accomplish at the end of your research is concisely put in the research objectives. So through you give a direction actually. So therefore, research objective becomes so very important because it's like a radar which gives you the direction as to which path that you are supposed to. So it's like a map, sorry, not a radar, map. Research objective must be achievable. So you cannot have an objective that is not achievable, which you cannot reach within time or about which you will not get data. So it must be framed keeping in mind the available time that you have, the infrastructure is required for the research, and you have the resources to do the field or to draw the research. So while you are writing your research objectives, please try to keep the following things in mind. First, define the focus of your study. If you do not do that, your objective will be incomplete. Clearly identify the variables to be measured. If you want that your objectives give you a clear map, so you clearly identify the variables that to be measured. Indicate the various steps to be involved, how you are going to proceed. Establish the limits of the study, and then avoid collection of any data that is not strictly necessary. Just because it is there, just because you are there, you can draw the information is not going to help you. Now, research objectives can be general or specific. The general objectives of your study states what you expect to achieve in general terms in your research. And specific objectives break down the general objective into smaller, logically connected parts that systematically address the various aspects of the problem. Your specific objectives should specify exactly what you will do in each phase of your study, how, where, when, and for what purposes. Now, your objectives, please remember the following very carefully, because writing your objectives becomes very critical. And if your words, your language is not good, then what happens often your research proposal gets rejected. So your objectives should be stated using action words, action words that are specific enough to be measured. They should be measurable. That can be, you can, not quantity. I'm talking in terms of measurable. That means you can give evidence which will be quantifiable. For example, your objectives, how you write your objective, to compare, to calculate, to assess, to determine, to verify, to describe, to explain. So this is how you will start writing your objectives. But please do not avoid using non-active verbs like believe, to study, or to appreciate, to understand. Because to understand, to appreciate, they are not quantifiable, they are not measurable things. They are very difficult to evaluate. That have you understood or not? How are you going to evaluate? How will the evaluator understand that you have achieved that objective of understanding? You have achieved the objective of appreciating something. So it is better that you to determine, to assess, because that can be understood. That have you been able to assess, or how have you been able to assess? This an evaluator can. So your research becomes more possibly successful. So choosing a too broad topic will again a common mistake that we make. So while writing your objectives, be very precise. Do not set any unrealistic aim, and choose a method that is compatible. That is, do not use talk of a method which is incompatible to the time frame, to the problem in hand. So in conclusion, I will conclude now. Social research is not the embodiment of individual common sense. It is an exemplar of rational collaboration. So the brain is a different thing. We are rational beings, yet we must remember that when we are talking of research, we are not talking of common sense. We are actually talking in terms of rational collaboration. It is not that researchers are immune from subjective or cognitive biases. We researchers, we are human beings as well. We cannot forget that we are not human beings. So as human beings, we will have our subjectivity. We will have our cognitive biases. It is important to remember that rather the process of research uses the checks and balances. Since we have the biases, so research process actually brings the checks and balances that prevent these individual flaws that we researchers have from flourishing in the work that we are doing. So as we do the same, as we work with other human beings, we tend to often have our subjective biases. So to get rid of the biases and bring out the true picture through our research, we tend to we need to have the discipline to adopt those checks and balances. In social research, the highest unit of cognition is not the individual, it is the community of scientific employees. Thank you so much. This is where I conclude.
Thank you so much, Professor Ganguly. That was such an erudite and scholarly beginning to today's evening program. We were enlightened, and all our participants have been talking of the same, that the way you explained the objectives and questions that one should follow while adopting to the means of social science research has really been very, very good. Thank you so much. Starting from your distinction between asking questions and asking research questions, your structural dimensions, your examples from everyday life, focusing on engaging students in learning. You're talking about the point that questions should involve the society, community, the group, and not an individual. Making questions answerable, not large. Selecting the proper objectives, the proper questions, all has been to the point and wonderfully delivered. Thank you, Professor Ganguly. We look forward to hearing you again and again. Thank you, sir. A very small instruction to our participants. There has been a very yes.
Can I intervene for a second?
Yeah. Please do.
Before we move on to the instructions, there are a few questions for Dr. Ramanuja Ganguly. May I just take up the questions from the chat box and place it to him. Ramanuj, is that fine?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
Do I open the chat box?
Yeah, this is a question from Anuja Gupta, who is faculty, Department of Sociology, our own college, Mrinalini Mahavidyapith. She wants
Hi,
to
Anuja.
know.
How are you?
She wants to know, how do we choose the one particular research question when there are multiple literature available on the topic of our research?
Okay. Any other question that you, Mithali, would like to?
Yes, you have. We have a few more questions. Just a second. I'll just give it to you. This is from Deepanjana Chatterjee. She wants to know, sir, kindly explain how steps can be incorporated in the objectives. If you can understand what she exactly means. Then there is another question. Should I give you all the questions first and then you answer one by one?
Yeah. No, I'll say, you will tell me the questions, I'll answer.
Okay. And there's another from Vidya Sagar Kumar. And the question is, sir, kindly say about formulation of research topic. Okay. This is from Shayantani Odhikari. The question is, sir, can you please repeat the explanation of general research objective?
I see a question from Humara Qasim. How research aims and objectives are different. I will take that question first.
Yes.
And then go on to the other questions that are coming to me. Okay. The last question that came, how research aims and objectives are different. See, research question is going to frame your aim. So that is why I have talked of the research question, that what is your question? What is your problem? So that is the basic theme. The objective is that you break down the aim of your research into tangible parts, tangible stages, and make them specific. So generally, you aim to do a research on a particular area, and then when you are writing the objectives, what are the variables that you are going to do? So what are the conceptual frames that you are going to use? So depending on that, you frame your objective. So that is where the difference lies between the total aim of your research and what are the objectives. Now there is a somebody wants my email ID. Please kindly share it with them. Then clarify between research question and research objectives. Okay, Anuja had a question where she states that she wants to find out that if there are so many literature available on a topic, how does one choose them? See, Anuja, as I was telling, that you need to prioritize your own position first. So framing your research question is very important. So there will be arguments, there will be numerous literature available, but if you are, please remember the word research. It is not research, it is research. So you are searching again. So if you are searching again, so you are locating the gaps that are there, and you may find skips and jumps. So from there you draw the priorities, and on the basis of your priority, your research question comes. So once you make a specific research question, that this is what you want to know, then only you will be able to draw your objectives, then only you will be able to make justice to your position as to how you are going to work out your research. So depending on all that, so there may be a numerous areas which are available, but ontological knowledge would not would only guide you up to your question. After that, it is your baby, and it becomes your position, and it is your epistemology. Now, there is another question that I saw was there. Steps incorporated in the objectives. I did not Dipanjana Chatterjee. When you say explain how steps can be, no, steps cannot be incorporated in the objectives. When I said that before you write your objectives, you find, first of all, it should be very clear to you that what kind of steps that you are going to take. Okay, so by then, before you write your objectives, you have your research question, you have your aim, so you know what problem you are going to do. So by then, you must be able to think, and then only you decide upon your objectives. Because if that is clear to you, then your objectives will be suitably adapted and your research will be feasible. Otherwise, you may have unsustainable research objective, which you may find at the end not possible to complete. So, how do you choose one particular research question? Okay, and there are too many compliments. Thank you so much from my listeners, my audience. I will give an explanation of general research objective. The general research objective is when you are talking in terms of your aim of your research. So this is what you want to know. Now, when you are talking of specific objectives, suppose you are talking in terms of, say, a particular tribal group or a caste group. So you want to see that, okay, if the caste dimension is important or not. Then you look at in terms of employment, in terms of education, in terms of housing. There may be many variables that you are breaking down, and then they become the specific objective. The general objective is to see how caste is operating in your daily life. Any other thing?
Yeah. We have a question from Vidyasagar Kumar. Sir, kindly say about the formulation of research topic.
Now, formulation of a research topic doesn't come like that. When we start, there's an audio problem. Anyway,
Please, sir, can mute करो.
When we are talking of when we are thinking in terms of our research, what actually happens is that we have the whole sky as our limit. But can you please move the other way? Getting really difficult. So the point is, when you start your research work, you think of the sky is your limit, but you have to bring it down. And once you start reading, once you start thinking in terms of your questions, and once you frame your research question, that what is your question? What is your pertinent question that you want to answer? Only then you will be able to have a topic of a very clear. Otherwise, you may have a theme. But a research topic, you can decide when you proceed with a theme and find out as to what you are going to do. And when you have a question, specific question to answer, only then you will be able to do justice to your topic. And remember, the conclusion chapter should always justify the title of your research. So this is one tip that you should always remember, that in your conclusion chapter, you should justify why the title of your thesis is so and so. Thank you so much. Anything else?
Thank you so much, Professor Ganguly.
Kolkata, please share my email ID.
Yeah, I will. I'm just leaving a note for all the participants that we are going to share Professor Ganguly's email ID very soon. And if you have any question directed to Professor Ganguly, which we could not take now due to paucity of time, you can also mail it to the ID which has been mentioned in the brochure. Thank you so much, Professor Ganguly. Now, there have been some participants who have been telling us that they couldn't hear Professor Ganguly properly, though many of us have told that it has got cleared with the passage of time. We would like to tell you that the entire lecture we'll upload it on YouTube at our earliest convenience, and we will share the link of the YouTube in your WhatsApp group. Thank you. Do we proceed to our next speaker, Dilipda Mitali?
Yes, Dilipda is the speaker there. The next speaker is there. The next speaker is there. So can we proceed?
No.
Is he available? Do I proceed?
No.
No. Okay. I'm waiting for your instructions.
He not joined. Please wait.
Dilipka, is it possible to communicate with Professor Shanot Kumar Ghosh?
হ্যাঁ ম্যাডাম, আমি দিলীপ স্যারের সাথে ফোনে আছি, জাস্ট চেষ্টা করছি। প্লিজ ওয়েট।
Yes.
হ্যাঁ, হ্যালো।
হ্যাঁ ম্যাম, জাস্ট কন্ট্যাক্ট করছি আমরা।
We have already shared Professor Ganguly's email ID in the chat box. Those of you who wanted to contact him can go forward. And I'm just reconfirming his ID once more. It's small letters rg.wbsu@gmail.com. It's rg.wbsu@gmail.com. We have also printed the email ID in the chat box. Thank you.
There is some technical problem. Please wait. Our next speaker joins shortly. Kolkata madam, is any announcement you can share?
No, we just had to share Professor Ganguly's email ID. So I have already done the same. Now we all are waiting for Professor Shanot Kumar Ghosh to join.
Yes.
You just instruct us once he joins.
Yeah, already. Actually, some network issue maybe. We
Okay.
try to plan. So,
Okay. Yes, we are waiting.
and yeah, sir, join. Sir, can you hear me? Sir, can you hear me? You are visible, sir.
Hello, can you listen?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. You are audible, sir. Thank you.
Audible, but I like to share my PPT.
Please, if possible, to forward Dilip sir or me. Then I can share your PPT. Sir, you have your PPT on your mobile?
Yeah, I have my mobile.
Okay, sir. Please.
First time
Send it to WhatsApp, sir. Either me or Snow.
Dilip sir, কি বললেন?
Is it visible, my PPT?
No, sir.
Visible.
No, sir. Follow my instruction. Click on 3 dot, then share content. Okay, sir.
Okay, but
Please click on 3 dot, share content, then share screen, then click setting option.
sorry, I cannot follow you.
Yeah.
Share content, then
Screen share screen.
share screen. Okay.
Okay, no, sir. Just allow first time. Just click on setting. Just click on setting. Yeah. It's visible. Sir, please open your PPT.
Is it visible?
Yeah.
Yes,
Sir, please click on play button in top. Third option, play button. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Please continue.
Okay. I would take this opportunity to welcome Professor Shanot Kumar Ghosh to our FDP program. Good evening, sir, and a very hearty welcome. Professor Shanot Kumar Ghosh is the ex-dean, Faculty of Arts, and head of the Department Education, Rabindra Bharati University. He has taught for 11 years in undergraduate colleges, 22 years in the university postgraduate and B.Ed departments, 3 years in postgraduate college, and continuing his work as a professor now in Netaji Subhash Open University. His research experience lapses over the last 30 years, where he has guided scholars for their PhD theses, MPhil projects, have himself participated in major and minor research projects. He has 4 books to his credit, along with 58 research papers in national and international journals. He contributed to the preparation of research projects. He edited 12 national level journals and 2 books. His administrative experiences spans over a period of 23 years. He has been the Directorate of Distance Education, RBU, Director, Center for Psychological Counseling and Disability Studies, RBU. His areas of interests are quality assurance in professional teacher education, the ODL system, which we all know as the open distance learning, the OER facilities, that is the open educational resources, etc. He also has his acumen in the ICT support in ODL systems. After so much, even today, he prefers to be a lifelong learner. It's a privilege to have you, sir. Today, he is going to enlighten us on measurement scale and questionnaire development. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Really, it's a learning phase to me in this lockdown period. Respected principal, Professor Dr. Bandyopadhyay, and other dignitaries and faculty members of the college, Mrinalini Datta College, and students and other dignitaries who are appearing in the as resource person. So it's really a privilege to me to be involved in this session. That is a 7-day faculty development program organized by Birati College and in collaboration with Mizoram University and Jadavpur University. And actually it has been promoted by the IQAC of the college. So it's really a privilege to me. I have been asked to talk about measurement, scale, and questionnaire development. I know it's very simple, particularly those who have already completed PhD or working on these areas, particularly in the social science fields. So it is nothing new to them. And I know this group is very heterogeneous. Some of you are very acquainted with the research methodology, and particularly in the statistical programs, statistical analysis, etc., etc. But some of you may not be very much acquainted with the system. So first of all, I must talk about a few minutes on this issue, and after that we can start a question and answer session. In that phase, we will discuss at length regarding any confusion or queries or from all of you. So this is our planning. Actually this part is very simple and very short. Anyway, we must try our best to go in depth about these issues. In this, the focal points of our discussion would be tools of measurement process, scale development, item generation, questionnaire development, and some related issues, just like other types of questionnaire or descriptive analysis type of procedures or systems we can follow. Anyway, let us start. We know for each and every type of research we need tools and scales to gather new facts or to explore new fields. I must say, for qualitative research, scales are not so important, but all types of researches, some sort of tools are required essentially. This is mandatory. Tools that manifest latent constructs the measure behaviors, attitudes, and hypothetical scenarios we expect to exist as a result of our theoretical understanding of the world, but cannot assess directly. We use scales for this purpose only. As you know, construct is very important in any research, particularly social sciences and education. When we identify a problem for conducting research, there are some components within the problem. Those are constructs. Actually, we measure these constructs in our research program. Suppose maybe a relationship between reading habit and result of the learner. So the question may be, is there any relationship, is there any impact of reading habit on the performance of the learner? So this is the question. So here aspects among both are. Somebody is talking.
Yes.
Okay, a large number of scales used that can measure a range of social, psychological, and educational behaviors and experiences. Let us try to create a primer, actually basic practices for skill development and broad applicable across many disciplines related to social. We anticipate this primer will be broadly applicable across many disciplines. And based on amalgamation of technical literature adapting a number of skills related to multiple disciplines. Now the tools of measurement.
Okay, sorry. Can you just, sorry.
Different tools are used for collecting different types of information or data for different purposes. Actually, same tools, same scales are not used for all purposes. So these are very specific, and for the specific purposes, we use different types of tools and different types of scales, etc. The researcher may use one or more tools in combination to meet his or her purpose, to meet the purposes, or to meet the problem of research. Appropriateness of a good tool depends on its relevance, balance, efficiency, objectivity, specificity, difficulty, discrimination, reliability, validity, and suitability. All these are very important aspects, and sometimes it is told that these are the characteristics of good research tool. But to me, these are the very good research tool for the for both qualitative and quantitative tools. Relevance, balance, efficiency, objectivity, specificity, and difficulty level, etc. All these are related with the qualitative aspects and quantitative aspects both. Discrimination, reliability, and validity are for quantitative research. So these are the major aspects, and let us see what is measurement. Quantitative assessment of performance of any individual is assessed in terms of scores through the measuring tools or scales. Scale may be said as a measuring tool, and as we know, when we calculate distance between one place to another or length of a table, that is we use scale, maybe centimeter scale or inch scale. Similarly, we can use the scale for the performance of the individual to the educational performance or psychological performance or something else, social performance. So measurement and scale are used everywhere in the field of research. Mental test scores vary parallel with performance changes. Level of scores varies with the performance level. So just like any scale, suppose thermometer, when temperature increases, the level of temperature, the level of indicator in the thermometer gradually develop or increase. When measures are expressed in units and are also taken from a true zero, constitute ratio scale. There are actually 4 types of scales, we know. Ratio scale is the best type of scale, and that is used mostly in physical sciences and also in educational field or social sciences, but very rarely it is used when true zero is there and all types of mathematical operations can be done. That means addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, etc. On the scores, obtained scores, then the scale may be called ratio scale. This is very refined, fine-tuned, and accurate test, rarely used in the field of social sciences, education, and some other similar disciplines. when scores are expressed in equal units, just like ratio scale, but without any true zero, but based on ranks, is known as interval scales. As we know, rank means we actually calculate ranks in a class promotion, first, second, third, fourth, etc., etc. Here there may not be any true zero and may not be any number that can be added, subtracted, etc., etc., multiplied or divided. So these type of scores are known as interval. First difference between first and second, second and fifth, fifth and 100, etc., etc. So this is another type of scale normally used in the educational scenario and in the social sciences also. Another type of scale is ordinal scales. When people or objects are ranked with respect to some traits or attributes are considered as ordinal scales. As for example, IQ quotient, there is no true zero, and but that can be ordered in different ranges. So it is known as ordinal scale. Nominal scale is a very more simple type. Based on our names, as just like male, female, urban, rural, and in this way we can differentiate. We can divide, and identify different types. So these are very simple type of division, and that is also based on a scale. That means a linear scale or continuum scale, and that is known as nominal scale. So these are basic 4 types of scales, and on the basis of these scales we measure. Now let us discuss about the scale development. Questionnaire and rigorous standardized test. I like to differentiate between questionnaire and standardized test, because questionnaires may not be standardized test, may be or may not be, but standardized tests are something different. Mostly psychological tests are standardized tests. In education also and in sociology also there are standardized tests, and there are some parameters that should be followed by that. If that are followed in the standardized scale, then only you can say that is standardized test. But in case of questionnaires, defined or sophisticated standardization procedure, statistical procedure may not be followed. I'm coming that point. There are 3 phases to create a questionnaire or standardized test: item development, skill development, scale evaluation, which can further be broken down into further steps, 9 steps. Actually, in the item development, there are 2 steps: domain identification and item generation, and content validity. This is very important. Domain identification means which area, which domain you are going to assess of a learner or of a person. So that is very important, and we have to define that, identify the different components of that domain, and on the basis of that we can develop some item. And whether the items are properly developed or correctly developed, that would be validated by content validity. So normally experts can validate these things, that whether the items are developed on the basis of domain and domain specification and objectives, etc., or not. On the basis of that, the validity can be determined. The second phase is skill development. In the process of skill development, pre-testing of items, after development of items, the items can be tried out on the same sample, same type of sample for developing or finalizing or practically fine-tuning the language and the content of that items. So this is the first phase of skill development, and after that, sampling and pilot survey that is being done. Sampling means sample may be drawn scientifically and as per our norms, and on the basis of that, that pilot, that items may be administered for pilot survey. Actually, now we know COVID testing or COVID vaccine is now maybe come out within few months. So the trial process is now going on the sample, and a human trial is now going on. So this is the same procedure, and on the basis of that, we can determine whether the vaccine is available or not, or it can be administered on the human body or not, or it can be manufactured industrially or not. So these are the common phases mostly applicable in across the disciplines. And after that means after the pilot survey, item selection is essential. Which items are truly reflecting the criteria or parameters what we want to measure. So this is very important, particularly in the field of social sciences. It is not correct for the hardcore sciences, but in the field of social sciences, it is very important. Item selection. There are some statistical measures through which you can select the best items, and on the basis of that, the final items can be selected. And through these items, we can extract some factors. Maybe maybe more than 1, 2, 3, 4 items can identify or can detect one area of learning or performance that may be told as factor. So this identification of these factors and extraction is very important, and it can also be done statistically. So these are the some issues, and last point is the scale evaluation. Scale evaluation, test of dimensionality, or that means when we develop test, first of all we identify some dimensions, whether our test or test items are measuring accurately those dimensions that we identified earlier. Is it correctly exploring the dimensions or not? This is very important. And then test of reliability and test of validity, and whether the tests are reliable and valid. Very simple example is like this. Suppose our wristwatch is a instrument, is a tool which measures the time, and there are two components in each instrument. One is reliability and another is validity. Reliability is that after each 12 hours, whether the small or our 12 hours, the small indicator is going around one cycle, is completing one cycle or not. That is reliability. But validity is actually considered with the external criteria. Suppose IST or Indian Standard Time indicate our validity of our wristwatch or our wall clock or something like this. So validity depends upon external criteria, and reliability depends upon internal criteria. So these two types of criteria, in both internal and external, should be validated when we are interested to develop a scale. Next point is item generation. Actually, Fowler identified 5 essential characteristics of item. Those are to ensure the quality of construct measurement, and it depends upon the quality. This quality of measurement depends upon the steps that has been followed during item generation. As you know, items are very important in a social science research, particularly in a questionnaire or similar type of tool development. First of all, need for understanding item, whether items are properly developed, accurately developed or not, it the understanding of the words, the language frame, and whether how those are reflecting, as because we know our mental process is going on with our with our item language or item language framework, frames or something like this. So these are very important. Need for items to be consistently administered to respondents. In this way, items can be identified. Proper answer, what would be the proper answer, and what marks be given or what scores be given for what type of answers, that should be calculated earlier. Access to the information needed to answer the question item accurately. Whether the subject can access easily or not. The willingness of respondents to provide the correct answer required to items. The willingness of the subjects is also very important. If the subjects become fanatic and they are not interested to give answers, then you never will get the correct response and the accurate result. So in terms of the number of options on the response scale, how many numbers would be given in a response scale, whether four options or 3 options or more than 4 or 5 options, it depends upon the level of the subject. That should be accurately determined. And you know, the Likert type response is very important, particularly in the field of attitude scale. When we measure attitude, there is no correct response, either yes or no, just like this, or 0-1 scoring. There may be in between 0 and 1, there may be different types of measures or scaling. So that should be very carefully determined, and that should be developed on the basis of that. That means the scale should be developed, the item should be developed on the basis of that. But there is a pitfall in the identification of domain and item generation. In the proper domain, conceptualization and definition, caution should be taken to avoid construct of representation. Construct of representation is very important. Actually, mostly we cannot provide the real situation to the subjects, to the learners. We actually develop the virtual or similar type of situation to our wording, so to our stimulus. So this is very important, whether it is accurately representing or not. This is very important aspect. Actually, our objective of this discussion is to discuss about the questionnaire. Questionnaire is a very important tool in the field of educational research, particularly in the field of survey type research. Questionnaire is used for collecting data on desired factual information from respondents. 2-3 words are very important: desired, factual information, and respondents. So when we collect information from the respondents on the basis of factual information, this is known as questionnaire. Actual questionnaire is based on some questions. When we ask questions and learners, subjects give their responses. From that responses, we can identify their level or performance level or something like this. This is very important aspect. Actually, question is a stimulus. Always question is a stimulus to the respondent, and on the basis of that stimulus, subjects makes their responses, and through that process, stimulus response process, we can identify the nature of or mental condition of the subjects. That is very important. For this reason, questionnaire is very important, and questionnaire can be used in different purposes. It refers to a device for securing answers to questions by using a form which respondent fills himself or herself. It is a very important aspect of a questionnaire. The respondent or subject should respond himself or herself. Actually, he or she should think about the item or react against the stimulus. It is a systematic compilation of questions that are administered to sampling population from which information is desired. This is very systematically it is organized and it is given to the respondents. It may be administered from individual persons to groups. It may be done for individual person or for a group, and so there is an opportunity to establish, report, explanation, the purpose of meaning, the purpose and meaning of items that may not be clear. So there is a scope of explanation, giving explanation in a questionnaire. So it is very much time saving and a low cost technique of collecting data or information from the respondents. Next, types of questionnaire. Actually, there may be two types of questionnaire, and there are three basic types of questionnaire. One is closed form. It requires short and check responses. For example, an example is given here. Suppose you are conducting this, you are admitted, you have been admitted for this faculty development program, and when pursuing that, if I ask why you joined this program, is it convenience of transportation? Is it or from your advice of your friend, or knowing the reputation of this institution, etc., etc., and you may rank it in the last column, first, second, third, fourth, etc. This is one type of questionnaire that is known as closed. Closed means you have no option to go outside this format. So closed format is very important, and actually this is important in this sense that it is very easy to calculate, to tabulate the whole score. Particularly the researchers are very much interested to use this type of questionnaire. There are some advantages of the questionnaire system or questionnaire tool. It is very easy to respond, less time required to answer, keeps the respondent on the subject, relatively objective, fairly easy to tabulate and analysis. Clear options are revealed. Clearly, very clearly, options are revealed. So it is very easy, and it is very easy to administer, and subjects or respondents can easily identify what they want to do. These are the advantages of this system. And on the contrary, there are another type of questionnaire, that is open form. Just reverse to this closed form. These are unrestricted questionnaire, call for a free response in the respondent's own word, free response as they like. Why are you pursuing this FDC program? If I ask you, all the participants can answer in their own way. So there's a wide scope and free to answer this type of question. This is known as open form. And there are another type of form, mixed form, when both the closed and open forms are used in the same questionnaire to make a balance between the two. These are the basic three types of questionnaire. And apart from that, Like questionnaire, there are other scales also that may be used in the research methodology, or that can be used for research purposes. That is, one is rating scale. This is also a type of questionnaire that can be rated by the respondent. Rating scale is an important technique of evaluation by which a person is assessed by another person. A person may be assessed by the another person through rating scales. It is an improved version of checklist where judgments or opinions are given indicating its degree or levels. Degree or level is very important here during rating. It involves mostly in qualitative descriptions. So for qualitative research, rating scales are mostly used, though in quantitative research also sometimes rating scales are used for different purposes. Thus, it is an expression of opinion or judgment regarding some situation, objects, or character, usually expressed on a scale of values. Rating scale. So, as you know, rating scale, I think most of you are acquainted with the rating scale. So, this is one aspect of our questionnaire. Two basic characteristics of rating scale are rated description, importance of each item, and quality of frequency are considered. So these two aspects are rated description and importance of each item and quality frequency are considered. So in the rating scale, each of the items are important, and frequency of each item is also very important, particularly for the research purposes. It is a tripolar process involving three poles or phenomenon on the basis of which rating scale has been developed, rated according to a continuum and a personal view. So these are the three important aspects, or so it is known as tripolar process. Next, let us have an example. Rate the present discussion session. Suppose this discussion session you can rate or evaluate how it is going on. In this way, there are 5 points. There is 5-point scale: excellent, good, average, below average, and poor. And you can provide score. If excellent 1, good 2. In this way, poor means 5. So in a rating scale, we can rate it at least in 5 different ways. Descriptive, that means the terms, the qualitative terms, that is excellent, good, average, below average, poor. These are the descriptive scaling process. Numerical scaling process is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. These are numerical. It may be represented in the graphs also. As you know, sometimes we represent graphs or through frequency or bar diagram. We can use it. Particularly, the frequencies can be measured in this way. Suppose how many participants has given 2, that means good. Suppose out of 100, 20 persons have given good or have rated good. So 2 into 20 is the score, overall score, or you can identify out of 100 means 5% people have rated the discussion session as good. In this way, NPC, that means normal probability curve, is another important aspect. As you know, in nature, a natural process is the distribution of any frequency like normal probability curve. So high end is low, less number of frequencies. In the low end also the less number of frequencies, and mostly in the middle part. And that is also another type of scale that is known as NPC scale, normal probability curve scale, and that is mostly used in psychology and education. And nowadays it is said that CBCS choice-based credit system, two types of measurements can be used. One is continuum, just like excellent, good, average, below average, etc. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, particularly in the practical sessions, or it can be through the NPC mode. So this is very important. We know the plus minus C sigma is the maximum, almost 100%, less than 100%, or 98 point something, or 99 point something are included in that area. So this is also being used in the as the NPC scale. And apart from then, these percentile scales can also be used. As you know, GATE or some other areas, field, we use percentile norms. And on the basis of that, that means a percentile curve is drawn on the basis of the scores obtained by all the students, and through that graph, that graph is like S, capital S, and on the basis of that we can measure one particular student, how he scored, whether good or bad or average or something like this. So this is another aspect of rating, and this is also used in different format. But there may be some errors of rating scale. We the teacher know very much. Sometimes we are very generous, and that is also error. Suppose a student who has no ability to get 80% score, sometimes being generous, we may provide 80% marks. That is also a type of error, and that is not accurate. So that is generosity error. Secondly, it is halo error. Sometimes without going through the performance of the respondent or subject, sometimes with the thumb rule we can provide scores to them. Suppose a student has taken many loose seats in his answer script, so he or she may get maximum, as far as possible, maximum number. So this is a type of halo error, and occasionally we do this halo error, so that should be controlled. Just like generosity error, there is also stringency error, and we know some teachers are very stringent. They are very much aware about the scoring process, and aware means they never they never become generous to provide scores to their students. So say alternatively they become stringent. So this is also another aspect. The error of central tendency. Sometimes we feel the error of central tendency, if it is normally distributed, so there is a pattern of getting scores of all the learners, and if it is non-normal, then there may be some sort of error. That means if it is positively skewed or negatively skewed, it may be non-normal, or platykatic or leptokatic or something like this, mesokatic. All these things are error regarding central tendency. So that should be controlled. And last of all is the logical error. When the respondent cannot understand the logic behind the item, then he or she can randomly put the answer, and that is also a type of error, that is logical error. These are major errors of rating scales. Another type of is checklist. The checklist is the simplest of devices, is prepared of behaviors or items. A list of behaviors or items are prepared first, and on the basis of that, the respondent or subject check that list. It is the simplest form of devices, systematizes and facilitates the recording of observation and helps to ensure the consideration of the important aspects of the object or act observed. This is a very simple form, but we can identify what are the most important aspects of that list. It can be used to count the number of behaviors with the frequencies occurring in a given time period. The best example of checklist is the Panelists interaction analysis system. As you know, Panelists had developed one mechanism, that is interaction analysis system of a classroom teaching learning process. Whether the teaching learning process is direct or indirect, he identified some rules and he checked whether direct or indirect. After each 3 seconds, he used to mark in a checklist, and through this process he identified that a teaching learning process in a classroom situation of 1 hour or 45 minutes or something, whether the teaching was direct or indirect, he measured it. So this is an example of a checklist, and it was used in a research process, and now it is also using for different types of researches. It systematizes and facilitates recording of observation. Observation can be recorded and systematizes through checklist. Nowadays, we can use the audio-video system, but at the same time, manually we can check the process of observation. So we are using all these devices for our research purposes. It is helpful for normative survey. Normative. Norm means for a particular research purposes, the score should be distributed normally or follow the normal probability curve. And when the research is according to that principle, then it can be said normative survey. That means objectives of that survey or research is to find out the norm. Case studies, case histories, studies of behavior, educational appraisal, etc. are the examples of checklist. Through checklist, we can identify all these things. It records facts, but not judgments. It is very important. It is recording the facts, not the judgment. Earlier we talked about the judgments. Now the purpose. Purpose of checklist is to draw attention of various aspects of an object or situation. Nothing of importance is overlooked. Nothing of importance is overlooked. That means every pros and cons, every point would be observed or may be observed through checklist devices. It can be used for gathering facts, information, and in a particular research or a survey. It can record or observe of observational study, and it is also applicable in classroom activities or any activities in a closed situation. Suppose a focus group, in a focus group discussion, we can use this checklist process. Checking of textbooks, we can use it, whether a textbook is gender biased or not. Through a checklist you can identify. Similarly, personality rating can be followed through checklist. Actually, Allport's personality factors testing is based on checklist. So these are the some areas of checklist. Now we can come to the point, construction, tryout, and standardization of questionnaire. Actually, when we start any research program, first of all, we identify some objectives, then research questions, then hypotheses, etc., etc. From objectives, we can identify the objectives. We can identify the constructs or variables or research questions or all these issues, and on the basis of that, we can develop the appropriate items of study, and to validate that items and to measure the reliability, we can try out. So these are some aspects. And before conclusion, I like to mention one important aspect, that is, for questionnaire, normally the modern researchers are not conducting reliability and validity test, as because questionnaire is not so highly sophisticated testing process, or it's a tool, testing tool. It is actually to gather some fact information from the respondents. So validity is sufficient. If you calculate the validity, construct validity, or any other type of validity, that is sufficient for developing questionnaire. But for constructing tests, when we are trying to develop a test, for that time, the reliability and validity both are important, and that should be developed. Only then the test scores are most reliable, most accurate, and that can be calculated through using different types of sophisticated statistical measures. So this is very important in this respect. So probably I have taken much time. Anyway, let me stop now. If you have any questions or queries, we can discuss for a few minutes. So let me stop now. Please.
Thank you very much, sir. That has actually been a very enlightening talk on measurement scale and questionnaire development. You have spoken to us about the accuracy test needed for measurement scale, different types of scale, scale development, scale evaluation, item generation, open form, mixed form, rating scale, checklist, and I can go on with it. Thank you. It has indeed been a very eye-opening lecture for all us students of social science. Sir, we have a plethora of questions. There have been participants who have been asking many questions, but I will not be able to address to all of them. We'll discuss about 2-3 questions, and the others I'll ask the participants to address to the email ID we have in the brochure, and we'll reach out to you with sir's help. Sir, this is a question from Humaira Husmi, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly. What is the context of true zero? What is the context of true zero?
Right. True zero. Suppose in a mathematics test in a school, a student can get 0, or he or she can get 100. So the range of scale, that scale is 0 to 100. And here 0 is true zero. But in languages like Bengali or Hindi or something like this, there is no true zero, as because no student can obtain 0. Most of the cases they do not get 0. And even in the scale also, sometimes we do not use 0. Suppose our salary scale, it never starts from 0. It starts from a basic, and after that it increases in every year, that is increment. So there is no true 0 in this scale. It is also a scale. The importance of 0 is very much in the field of education and in the field of mathematics and statistics. If you find true 0, then the score or digits or numbers can be added, subtracted, multiplied, and divided. Otherwise, it is very difficult to make these type of mathematical operations. There must be some errors if there is no true 0. So here is the importance of true 0. So I was talking about true 0, and whenever we develop scale, true 0 actually the very important factor. Suppose in a thermometer, Fahrenheit thermometer, there is no zero, but we can use it. So, but problem is that when we like to add or subtract or multiply the scores, then the problems may arise. So there are scales without zero, without true zero, and there are some other scales also with true zero, suppose centimeter scale or inch scale or inch scale or something like this. Here lies the importance of true zero.
Thank you, sir. The next question which we would like to address is from Dhruvo Charan Hota. He asks, what are the interrelationships among research objective, questionnaire, and uses of statistical tool? If I may repeat, the interrelationships among research objective, questionnaire, and uses of statistical tool.
Okay, thank you. But really, this is actually the backbone of any research. And there are some other points also. Let me say a few words about this. Actually, any research question or research problem starts from research problem, failed research problem. And that research problem has two parts. One is constructs, that is variables, etc., and that may be tested through hypothesis. So we start from our research journey from identifying our research problem, that is failed problem, which where you have no answer. And from that research problem, we first of all we identify the objectives, what we like to do. There are many such problems where there is no answer. So we must be pragmatic to find out the answer, and in case of research there is a limited time, or within a limited period we have to complete it. So we can identify some areas, major areas where we can study, and that is the objective. That is, objective means your objective is to study on those areas only. That means your study becomes restricted to some areas, to limited areas, and this is one aspect. And on the basis of that objective, actually we develop our hypothesis, or sometimes in the qualitative research we need not to develop hypothesis. We develop research questions. Research questions are very important, and we actually throughout the whole research process, actually we try to find out the answers of these research questions. It may be qualitatively or quantitatively. For quantitative research, after research question, we identify some hypothesis. Hypothesis means the relationship between the variables or factors, how they are related or interrelated, and what are the results. For qualitative research, there are also some areas or factors which can be identified through our research question. And on the basis of research question or hypothesis, actually we develop our tests or tools. Questionnaire is very simple type of tool, not sophisticated. You cannot conduct any or compute sophisticated statistical analysis through questionnaire. I am repeating, through questionnaire you cannot be able to analyze sophisticated analyze it statistically using sophisticated formula or sophisticated processes. So questionnaire is very simple, only to find out some real facts. That is also very important for any research. And in the field of social science researches, actually we relate our facts with the obtained parameters. So this is another aspect. And to study these facts or other types of sophisticated parameters, we develop either questionnaire or some tests. Or if the standardized tests are available, sometimes we use that standardized test. This is the relationship between from questionnaire, questions, research questions, and tool development. And after developing tools, the statistical analysis are being conducted. So I was talking about scales, but the time is very short. There are 4 types of tests I have scales I have talked up with you. One is nominal scale. You cannot use highly sophisticated statistical analysis with nominal scale. Only names are associated with this. Another type is interval scale and ordinal scales. Some measures you can adopt. Mostly for the interval scale, you can use the comparatively sophisticated statistical analysis for interval scales. But for ratio scale, you can use all type of operations, even mathematical operations, statistical operations, everything can be done. So what type of statistical analysis will be conducted, it depends upon the scales that you are using in your data collection tool. That is closely related. The scales used in the data collection process or devices and statistical analysis, these 2 things are closely related. For sophisticated analysis, actually quantitative analysis are being done, and descriptive analysis and some sorts of qualitative analysis are being done for another type of tools. That may be questionnaire or some other similar type of tools what I have talked about, rating scale, etc., opinioneer, and some similar type of tests. So statistical analysis is completely dependent on the scales. Okay, I think within a short time, I have tried my best to clear
Yes,
it,
yes,
all of you.
definitely, sir. Thank you, sir. We have other participants like Shayantoni Odhikari, Deepti S, Sneha Smriti. They have also put up their questions. We have registered them. We'll try to answer all of your questions through our email. We are really very thankful to you, Professor Ghosh. We would love to hear expert at various national level workshops. Along with teaching in Punjab University, she has also taught in B.Ed course at 2 colleges affiliated to the Mumbai University. She is a member of Research Development Committee in Education and Physical Education, member of Board of Studies of Interdisciplinary Center for Swami Vivekananda Studies, a nominated member of Board of Studies in MTech Engineering Education, to mention a few of her myriad achievements. As chairperson of Department of Education, Punjab University, she led the team for sanction of MHRD schemes and set up CALM at the university. She completed the task of getting NCTE recognition for present and previous taught MED courses at the department. She believes in collaborative approach in bringing relevance to existing courses. Today, ma'am will be enlightening us on effective research report writing. We hope it will be a wonderful experience for us, ma'am. Handing over the mic to you.
Thank you so much, Upkathaji.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am very thankful to Dr. Apurva Bandhopadhyay, Principal of Mrinalini Datta Mahavidyapith, Professor Basab Chaudhary, the Vice Chancellor of West Bengal State University, Professor Loknath Mishra, Director of FDC, Mizoram University, Dr. Muktipada Sinha, Head of the Department of Education, Jadavpur University, Dr. Dulip Kumar Mondal, Head of the Department of Education at MD Mahavidyapith, and Dr. Mitali and Dr. Upkatha for making this possible for me to join today. Thank you so much. The topic given to me today appears a very drab topic in a series of lectures on research methodology, but it is what every researcher aspires to compile in the end. So that gives me an edge as I try to expound on the topic with the help of a PowerPoint presentation. And I'm going to share my content now. I hope the audience is able to view this. Right. Friends, writing a research report requires you to be alert right from the time you search for a topic, you collect your review of studies, and in order to be effective, in order to save time and money, one really needs to be alert at the time of tool development. Now, this topic has come to us in the series of lectures just after a lecture on different methods of collecting data. And Professor Saab in the previous lecture was explaining rating scales as I joined in between. And I'm very happy to note that an elaborative discussion on how to develop tools and what things to keep in mind while using different tools has already been taken up. I begin with the meaning of a research report. A research report has to be systematic because there are readers out there who would like to view what has been done, why it has been done, and how it has been done. It's a comprehensive document that covers all aspects of the subject matter of the study as mentioned on the title page. It is very important to, I'm sorry, there is a window which is covering half of my PowerPoint presentation. Yes, there's a window. Can it be moved, please? Can we have some other format? Hello? Can we have some other format for the display? Okay.
Ma'am, over here we can see the entire PowerPoint pretty well. No windows are coming in front here.
All right. I'll try to shift.
Okay, okay, ma'am. Okay.
Oh, yes, I'm able to move it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. Thank you, ma'am.
So,
Some hang. Okay,
thank
please.
you. The research report helps the researcher to actually communicate to the readers the passion with which he or she has conducted the research and convey to them the methodology which is followed and the hypotheses that got tested. My dear friends, a research report can be a PhD research report or it can be a project report of a research project in which maybe you are required to submit an interim report or a final report. So my presentation today will touch upon different aspects of organizing the report for which the purpose of the report has to be very clear to the researcher. As you can see on the slide, it has to be organized, factual, and objective presentation of the information about the project, about the study, about the problem of research. It is the condensed form of research work which is done by the researcher, and all the steps are involved. All the involved steps are presented in the form of a thesis or the dissertation. Why am I not able to get to the next one? Okay, yes. In order to write a good report, one should be very clear why we are writing this research report. Is it for evaluation of the PhD research work done by the researcher, or is it for further funding of a research project, or it is the conclusion of a research project which is now being compiled in a report? Is the writing relevant to the topic? Well, when you are compiling your report, everything that is required to explain the work done as mandated in the topic Does the report contain all those things? For this, you need to know what goes into the report. There are various forms of conventions which are followed. The university PhD thesis report, the research report of a PhD thesis follows a particular convention. Usually, there are 5 chapters to it, which is the standard format, but it varies from university to university, and also many a times it is the nature of the study which will allow certain changes to be made in the report. For example, if it is an experimental study, maybe you need to give an elaborate chapter on the design of the experiment. If it is a descriptive study, maybe you need to incorporate a full chapter on the conceptual framework of the variables under study. If it is a fundamental research where a theory is getting tested, maybe you need to give a whole chapter on theoretical frameworks, which usually in a usual PhD thesis is part of maybe chapter 1 itself. And another question for brainstorming needs to be how the finding of the report will benefit the target group. Is the researcher aware to whom the report is going and who will be the consumers of the research report? These are the things which the researcher needs to keep in mind. Many of us are also supervising research. So when you are guiding a research study, at that time, if these questions are thrashed out with the researcher, I think we are doing a good job of clarifying things for ourselves and not getting messy chapters towards the report writing stage. If we answer these, if we try to dwell on these queries, then the following type of questions we will reach to. Like, who will be the consumers of the research findings? Will these be teachers? Will these be policy makers? Will these be other experimenters? If it is an action research report, will it be the practitioners who are in the institution? And what is the purpose of the research? Is the research providing a solution to a problem which is local, like in an action research report? Is it providing the conclusions to an experiment which was funded by some research agency, and the purpose of the research was to report back to the research agency? What are the guidelines by the funding agency according to which the report has to be funded? What is the prescribed format? And are there credits for a creatively presented research report? My dear friends, there are various universities which allow now the use of the first person. Delhi University has allowed researchers to present their thesis like a first person narrative, where the person is giving a whole account of how he or she encountered the problem, experiences of the field, and it makes a very lucid reading. So, are there credits for a creatively presented research report, or do we have to go by the same conventional method? It will do well for the researcher to find out these things in the beginning. So, while preparing a research report, the following issues may be considered. What is the objective of the report? Majorly, in most of the cases, it is the researchers, the PhD scholars, the fellowship holders who are writing the research report with the objective of obtaining a degree of PhD. So for them, it is important to know what type of problem or the subject is it on which they are writing the report, the nature and type of research, whether it is experimental, descriptive, historical. What can be the size of the report? Can you go on endlessly adding to the volume of the report, or is there a size constraint? What will be the time and cost involved in preparing the report after doing the research? For example, for a junior research fellow, the period uh, of doing the research and completing the report stretches maximum to 5 years. And now there are UGC guidelines where the the scholar is accountable for delay. So one has to keep in mind the time and cost of the research work and the amount to be spent on preparing the report. Come to the point of language. Now, let's say that most of us are writing our research reports in English for wider circulation and for wider readership as well. And we upload it on the Shodh Ganga. But many a times it happens that while you are conducting a particular research, maybe you have interviewed certain people uh, whom you want to quote verbatim. And for that, you need to use another language. It could be Bengali, Punjabi, it could be Hindi, Malayali, Tamil, Telugu, any language. So those quotes have to come in that language as well. Also, if you have used a questionnaire in which there are the local language has been used, so your report will have now two languages, and this consideration has to be kept in mind at the time of preparing the typed form of the report. Another thing is, many a times, let's say in historical research, you are quoting from text. That text may be in a local language, regional language, or a very ancient language. Then also the script has to be kept in mind, how it has to be incorporated in the report. Otherwise, the language guidelines for a good research report is that the language should be clear, concise, and to the point. What is required to be explained about every aspect of the report, a well-constructed sentence, well-constructed paragraphs, to the point reporting in clear language is the requirement. Now, the researcher must be clear what should be the contents of the report, what should be the order of those contents, how many copies of the research report are required, what certificates and documents are to be attached in the report. I would like to show you certain copies of reports. I'm stopping the sharing for a minute and going back to the camera. If the full camera can be made, or okay. Let me show you that I have this thesis from Lovely Professional University, right? And it has a number of certificates. One is the declaration by the candidate, where the candidate declares that this is his or her original work. It is also signed by the investigator. There are more than 2 certificates of this type about data collection and so on attached to the thesis. In another thesis by a student in Banaras Hindu University, now you can see the variation in the type of covers. Look at the cover of this thesis from Banaras Hindu University. It has a picture, it has logos, it has a different color, and different students can use different colors in their binding and formatting. Here, there are guidelines of the university, and according to that clause, a certificate is to be attached to inside the report. There is a pre-submission completion certificate. Some universities require you to attach the course completion, the PhD course completion certificate also inside. This is a copy of a thesis in Punjab University, and here you will find there is no name of the supervisor on the cover. It just does not have any kind of embellishment. It only has the minimum required information on it, which is very contrary to many other universities, several other universities where the front cover is very well decorated, and inside also there are several documents. So coming back to sharing my content again. Yeah. Certificates and documents to be appended also include the questionnaires and appendices that you want to have to include in the report, which could be lengthy tables, which could be list of schools for data collection, which could be pictures of the site where you have collected data, which could be samples of the answer sheets of the students, and so on. So what certificates and documents have to be appended will come in the beginning of the report, and the appendices will come at the end of the report. Regarding format, every university has a standard format for which I will come on this in the later slide also. Regarding the binding of the report, it can be a hardbound thesis or it can be a spiral bound report. I have come across universities uh, where they prepare a spiral bound or a soft bound report first, and it's only after the PhD viva of the candidate that a final report with all the corrections made into it, that is then finally bound in hardcover. So the type, quality of material, color, content on cover page, etc. related issues, I have shared some samples already with you. The steps in a research report are as follows, as you see on your screen. My dear friends, the writing of research report is not what you do in your 5th year. In fact, the preparation for that begins from the time your topic is approved. So the review of studies that you do, you have to see to it that you have references for all the reviews, that you have the details of all the tools that you have surveyed before selecting a particular tool, and that you have all your data with you, all references, and you have decided on a particular format of your analysis and so on. So you will have different folders on your computer or uh, registers and folders in which you are collecting your paperwork as well. It is good to have a logical analysis of your subject matter and have separate folders. And you prepare a final outline in discussion with your supervisor or in discussion with your team of research project. And according to the guidelines, you can then have the final outline. You prepare a rough draft first. In fact, for every chapter, there are many rough drafts before you rewrite and polish them and prepare the final draft of the different chapters, which flow in reading for the reader. The preparation of the final bibliography continues till the very last day because you're incorporating the latest studies and also checking out that nothing is left out which can be of meaning to the reader who will go through this particular research report. The research report has 3 main sections: the preliminary section, the body of the report, and the reference section. There are several preliminary pages, as I tried to show you in these theses. The title page is there on the cover and inside as well. This title page needs to have the following information: essentially, the name of the institution to which the report is being submitted, the degree for the award of which the report is being submitted. Is it an MPhil report, a postgraduate course dissertation, or is it a PhD report, or is it a DLit report? Name of the candidate will come, name of the supervisor may or may not come, as is the case in my university as opposed to many other universities. The date of submission or the year of submission will definitely come on the cover page, which provides a chronological sequence to the future researchers as to when was this research finally submitted, when was this research conducted, so that they have a chronological reference for the same. The preliminary pages usually have these things. When you pick up a thesis, you will find a title page. You may or may not find an abstract. You will definitely find an acknowledgement, a table of contents, list of tables, list of figures and pictures, a list of abbreviations. If abbreviations have been used in the study, it is a good practice to have a list of abbreviations in the beginning so that the reader can refer to it if it comes across abbreviations within the report. The abstract and acknowledgement. I have taken up this section because let's say in Lovely Professional University, they they insist on an abstract. And I found it a good practice that right in the beginning of your report, if you give an abstract which runs into, let's say, 2.5 or 3 pages, giving you a brief statement of the scope of the study, its findings and conclusions, all in a synoptic way. So just the way an avid researcher would go in for the summary section, if an abstract is there, it is a good practice. Also, in many universities, a separate abstract is written along with the report. This may be required of a research project also, that you have a separate abstract. Acknowledgement is another section which comes in the preliminary pages, where a note of thanks, uh, uh, statement of gratitude to the, let us say, principal of the institution, the supervisor, and the other people in the field who have assisted or facilitated in the data collection, and have assisted in the completion of the course of research work. They are acknowledged. The authors of the various publications are also acknowledged. Libraries are acknowledged. Laboratories are acknowledged in this acknowledgement section. The table of contents is a very technical affair. The table of content has to be, it can be in two ways. There can be a simple table of contents and then a detailed followed by a detailed table of content, where you show the major divisions of the report, the chapters, their subsections, uh, in different fonts, maybe highlighting or keeping the main sections bold and giving indents for the subsections. And each of the subsections is also paginated, so the pagination is there, and bibliography and appendix come in the end. In the table of contents, the preliminary pages also come, and they are usually numbered in small Roman numerals before the main body of the report is mentioned in the table of contents. So you will have the preliminary pages, which will have the acknowledgement, the list of tables, and so on, which will be numbered in Roman numerals, small Roman numerals. And then you have chapter 1, which may be the introduction or the rationale of the study, and its subsections, and all the pages from there will start as 1. So from 1 page to the last page of the summary and conclusions will be the main body in the table of contents. And then again you will have the appendices, the appendix section, in which the table of content will contain this section of appendices, where if questionnaires are there, the different drafts of a tool which has been developed during the course of the study, if you're attaching that, those are there. Lengthy tables related to the analysis, maybe they are there. List of institutions from where you have collected data, that is there. So all that is going to come in the table of contents. In fact, a good table of contents is a great relief for any reader and the examiner, because it shows that you have done a thorough work, and you have actually listed every section of your work. It is a peep into the entire body of your research report. The table of contents may run into maybe 3 or 4 pages also, but it really gives you a gist of the entire work done. And a person who is looking for research on a particular variable can go to the pertinent pages, can refer to the pertinent tables, and have a quick look at the research report. The abstract, if any, in the report and acknowledgement, list of figures and list of people are also entered in the table of contents. Okay, next. Okay. Something very important regarding the tables, because tables usually emanate out of chapter 3, which is the usual format. That in the chapter 3 you have methodology, where you are listing your sample and you are giving tables related to reliability and validity of the tool. and chapter 4 majorly where you are analyzing your data. And there you need to have every table numbered according to the chapter number. So in chapter 3 you will have tables numbered as 3.1, 3.2 and so on. And in chapter 4 you will have the tables numbered as 4.1, 4.2 according to the section of the analysis as well. So every table should have a number and a clear title. What does the table contain? For example, in chapter 3, distribution of the sample is table 3.1. In case of analysis, the chapter on data analysis, let's say table 4.3 shows significance of difference between means of two groups on the variable of social competence. So like this, clear title has to be given there. Now, basis or unit of measurement should be clearly stated to facilitate understanding. Now, if there are any measurements of, let's say, height, weight, volume, pressure, and so on, then what are they measured in? Is it mm? Is it mg? Is it kilometers? Whatever it is, it has to be clearly stated. Explanations can be provided as footnotes, and if the table is of secondary data, the sources must be clearly cited. For example, of census, of data taken from various texts. Then we come to the body of the report. I think I have made amply clear the preliminary pages, which are essential to providing authenticity to the whole report. The documents, the certificates, the table of contents, the abstract, and the acknowledgement are usually the things which go in the preliminary chapter. Now, the body of the report is actually going according to the chapters. This is one example of the first chapter of your report of research. The first chapter will have introduction, which will begin with the rationale of the problem. Many a times in educational research, the researcher begins with why education is important, or why science education is important, or why morals in the society are in a state of crisis. Hence, the moral judgment, a study on moral judgment is required, and so on. So you have to link and link the problem that you are going to take up with the current situation, where in the very first paragraph, the reader is hooked because of your lucid introduction, a welcome entry into the realm of the researcher's work, like why I got interested in this work, and it is so important. I found a gap in research, and that is how I felt encouraged, or I felt the urge to go on into this study. And yes, it is not only my personal urge. There are previous researches which have shown this kind of data, but actually I do not see like that, or the current reports in the newspapers are giving a position otherwise. Hence, it was important to study them, and so on. So, you in your introductory section, you begin with a rationale for the problem. You introduce the whole thematic scene that urged you into the research problem, and along with that, then you follow it up with the analysis of previous research, that in this area large number of researches were done, or few researches were done, or researches in other countries were done on, and they provide an insight into empirical basis for arriving at certain conclusions, which seems to be challenged according to the present situation in the society, and so on. So in social sciences, where change is taking place, I got a question, empirical. Okay, empirical means that it is based on actual things. It's not an inference. It is not just abstract thinking. It is based on actual data. Empirical would mean that the results which are drawn by previous researchers have been drawn on empirical data. This is why I refer to the word empirical. And then whatever has been done earlier, how it fits into the theoretical position of previous researchers, which theories were tested by the previous researchers, were their theories tested at all, was there addition to existing theories, or did these researchers contribute to theory information and evolving theory? Is your research going to be part of building up that theory? So the relation of present problem to the theoretical position of previous researches is also undertaken in this section. You provide the significance of the problem, why it is urgent to study, and then you arrive at the statement of the problem. Also, while giving the statement of the problem, you do a number of drafts. It's not in first go, or you do not just begin with the statement of the problem. You do a number of drafts, and since now you are putting it in the research report, so you will actually give a statement of the problem, and in most universities it is given in capitals without any punctuation mark. So statement of the problem is given in all caps without any punctuation marks. And it is followed by the delimitation of the study. That the study is delimited to so-and-so samples, so-and-so tools, or so-and-so era, and so on. Assumptions, I think I missed out one point over here, that objectives of the study have to be listed, assumptions for hypotheses and statement of hypotheses, and then every term in the title of the study has to be clearly defined. If you are assessing certain variables, then the operational terms for those have to be given here. In this slide, I have talked about all that I was mentioning in the previous slide, so I'll skip this. We come to, okay, I have not prepared any slide for chapter 2, but wherever you are required to write a chapter 2, many times researchers are confused on one point. The significance of the research, they give reference to previous researchers, and then you have a chapter 2 coming, and that also gives you a review of studies. So what are we doing here? Well, friends, you have an option. Either you incorporate the review of studies in the very first chapter before you arrive at significance of the problem, where in the significance of the problem, you are actually giving the studies which have pointed towards a particular relationship or given a particular kind of result, and why it is important to research it further on the basis of the research gap that you have identified. That comes in the significance of the problem. And then if you are not incorporating the review of all the studies in chapter 1, you are writing a separate chapter 2 on review of the literature, then what you're going to do is you will give a section-wise report of reviews. Chapter 2 will be review of related studies, where you give section-wise summary also, and in the end, you give a clear delineation of what are the gaps which you found in your review, and hence from those gaps will emerge your objectives and hypotheses. The chapter 3 is usually on method and procedure of the study. This chapter, in fact, the researcher should start writing at the time when he or she is preparing the tools, because preparation of tools or selection of tools is a tedious task, and it has to be done according to the sample, according to the context of the sample, and so on. So if you are using standardized tools, it is still simpler. But if you are constructing your tools, then all the stages of tool preparation, if you start writing right in the beginning, it will help you to report it better at the time of compilation of the research report, because if you leave it to the end, you will forget half the things, half the actual situations which you underwent, and maybe you'll just write in very brief that this is how the items were selected, validated, and then you went in for tryout, you did the discrimination index, or you constructed the achievement test according to a blueprint, you tried it out, and then you modified it, and finally this is the final draft. Those will be the technical steps. But in order to give a real feel to the reader about your actual data collection and tool construction, you need to actually give the review of all other tools also briefly, which you had uh, gone through before you arrived at the decision, uh, and you use it as a rationale for construction of the tool. Because let's say you want to construct a tool on self-esteem. Why should you be constructing a tool on self-esteem when there are so many tools available? Is it regarding, is there a question regarding the context and the language? Uh, that as per your area of research, you have to answer. So you just don't write the names of the tools and describe them briefly and get over with it. It makes a good study and an effective study if you give detailed steps of your tool construction. So my dear friends, in the method chapter, we begin with the research method used in the study. If it is an experimental study, you will give a rationale for what type of experimental research design it was used. And if it is a descriptive study, why you are employing the descriptive survey type of study, and what kind of tools you are going to employ in the data collection, or you have employed in the data collection, that will go in your procedure employed. When you are writing the sample and method of data gathering, at that time, it is always advisable to first define your population. What is the population from which you are going to draw the sample, and what are the methods of, what is the method of sampling that you had used in your work? When was this sample selected and from where? All this should go into the sampling. Towards the end, towards the end of this chapter, you're going to list the statistical techniques employed for data analysis. An interesting thing has happened during the pandemic, that many of our researchers are not able to go out into the field and use the standardized tools as such. So what are they doing? They are preparing Google Forms. They are using technology to reach out, and they are not following the same kind of sampling method. So those who are at this stage of their work, I advise them that they should report it very realistically, that they were collecting their data during the pandemic and they had to switch from standardized tools to preparing their Google Forms, and maybe use a snowball sampling method of teachers or of students by getting in touch with school teachers or principals and getting the phone numbers or email addresses to reach the sample. You cannot, it will be good for your research, it will give a good authentic report. I move on to the next slide. There are questions flashing for very few seconds and I could not read them, so I'll take them in the end. We come to chapter 4, which is the heart of the report, because whether quantitative or qualitative, your chapter 4 or whichever number it comes to will be the what you're doing with your data, how did you handle your data. I have supervised both quantitative and mixed method researches, and I had to have a partitioned chapter 4, where I was first talking about the quantitative data, then about the qualitative data, and then how the two complement or contradict each other, and what kind of conclusion will that lead to. So, as a researcher, you need to report your data analysis with full honesty. And while reporting it, what has to be followed? There's a simple scheme that you can take your analysis according to the objectives or hypotheses. That for objective 1, this data is presented, and this is what it leads to. For testing hypothesis 1 related to objective 1, or If there are two hypotheses related to objective one, then those two are mentioned. So you can have your presentation in terms of objectives or hypothesis testing, or you can have it in terms of the kind of analysis that you are giving. Let us say first you are giving descriptive analysis followed by the inferential analysis, or quantitative analysis followed by the qualitative analysis. So these are different methods, but this chapter essentially is going to deal with that the data that you have collected, how you have analyzed it, and that the conclusions that you are drawing from this data are for that sample, and according to whether it is experimental or descriptive research, what is the generalizability of the conclusions. Also, you are going to discuss the results. When you are testing a hypothesis, that hypothesis will be tested, supported by tables which are showing the data in terms of means or maybe T ratios or ANOVA or regression analysis and so on. So your hypothesis is there, the tables are there, and interpretation of the results in the tables follow with the discussion of results with respect to related studies. The result that you obtain from a particular table, and then when you arrive at something like the hypothesis is rejected or is not to be rejected, then you take it further and discuss that so and so researchers have similar results, or the result of the present study is in contradiction to studies by so and so. And the conclusion is always drawn in on the basis of whether hypothesis is accepted or rejected. Many a times the researcher is tempted to, paraphrase the table. That, let's say, table 4.1 shows the mean, median for so and so values given again in the paragraph, and the skewness and kurtosis value this much, and you just give the textbook line that if the value is between these two figures, then it is leptokurtic, or it is platykurtic, or the data is normally distributed because of so and so. Do we give a hypothesis for every kind of quantitative? I could not get the full question, but yes, in a quantitative study, we usually give a hypothesis for every objective. I could catch half the question, so I'm trying to answer that. Maybe many a times it happens that researchers are tempted to give another objective right in the beginning, that one of the objectives is to develop um, learning modules, or to develop an intervention strategy. Well, that is part of the work, that is not the objective of the study. So I would advise not to add such an objective. Objective of the study can be directly related to the hypotheses. Also, if it is an exploratory study, then you may not have any hypotheses. You will have objectives or research questions. In the morning, I think in the early evening, there were presentations on research questions. So you have already come to know how to frame research questions and what precautions to keep in mind. So the study report, the research study report is really effective if it has a connection between objectives, hypotheses, and findings, or research questions and the findings. Because for every question, you have done extensive field work, you have invested time, money, you have spent so much time getting to understand the process, and what were the results, what were the conclusion. Did you get an answer to your research question? Did you get a partial answer to your research question? If you got a partial answer to your research question, ma'am, is research question I was both choose? Yes, you can use both research questions and hypotheses. You can use, because a research question is going to help you frame testable hypotheses also. Many a times there are research questions for which there may not be testable hypotheses, but research questions can be answered. So you can have objectives, research questions, and then limited number of testable hypotheses. So in your report, you will proceed according to objectives. You will have a section of hypotheses which are tested and the research questions which got finally answered in your discussion of results. If you want to have a separate section for that. I come back to my slide. I began with this slide from the top statement that there is no need to paraphrase the tables. The tables tell their own tale, and what inference is to be drawn from the table, that should be written in the paragraph below the table. And if there are very lengthy tables like item analysis of 100 question tool scale, so the item analysis table can be put in the back in the appendix. No need to put it over there. And a brief remark can be given that so many items are found to be okay, and these were incorporated, and a shorter table can be put inside the chapter 3. The text should not repeat all the information given in the tables. I've already said that. The formula and statistical procedure should be clearly specified and explained in detail. This may or may not be desirable, because nowadays when you are using SPSS, you are not writing the formulae, but you must write the choice of statistical technique. For example, why you are using ANOVA and not MANCOVA, or why you are using a particular statistical technique. The rationale can be given in brief, and then you may specify which software you are using for the same. And this I've already said that it can be presented in descriptive and inferential. And when you are discussing the results at that time, if you find very contradictory results, it is all right to mention that it may be because the tool is outdated, or maybe the tool is from another context, or the technique require a longer application. For example, we conducted a research on brain-based learning and its effect on self-esteem. Now, self-esteem of the low achievers did find a jump, but if the technique is used for a longer time, maybe the results will be different. So if you have found any contradictions and there are certain things about your research work which you want to mention, please mention that the results are like this, which could be because of a faulty tool, or because of, let's say now that during the pandemic, you are collecting data from people who are not in their normal settings. So you can mention how your findings may have got affected because of the pandemic. We come to the section of summary and conclusions. This section includes a brief restatement of the problem, description of procedures used, and discussion of findings and conclusions of the study. This also includes recommendations for further study and implications of the study. So when you're writing implications of the study, please see that the implications emerge from your work. It is not that now you have the mandate. No, it is not mandatory to give pictures, photographs of your work. But if you have, it is always advisable. Let me give you an example. There was this principal of a government school who had done work on continuous comprehensive evaluation. So she attached the copies of the different performers which she designed, uh, the pictures of teachers conducting continuous comprehension evaluation activities, and the kind of meetings she had with different groups of teachers in order to give them different strategies for comprehensive and continuous evaluation. So she attached those pictures. So if your study is innovative, If you have done something out of the ordinary, then it is a good thing to attach pictures, but it is not mandatory. So coming back to the implications, since you have given all your discussion of results, findings, and conclusions in chapter 4, how chapter 4? In case of quantitative research, chapter 4 will have first the scheme. It is better to give first the scheme of your data analysis presentation. That maybe in the first section you are checking the normal distribution or normalcy of your data scores. Then you are justifying or testing the assumptions for using a particular technique, and then giving descriptive analysis in terms of means, standard deviations, skewness, kurtosis. Then you can go to inferential section where you are using different inferential techniques. It can be T-ratio, it can be ANOVA, as per your objectives and the design of the study, whichever you are using, the inferential statistics, and maybe later on the conclusion part. So if I may suggest, many a times if you have your sample variables like rural, urban, gender, and let us say good and bad study habits, or high and low level of intelligence, and so on, then you can have the discussion, the presentation of all the results in terms of these sample variables, the categories of your sample. So all results on the basis of gender, all results on the basis of urban and rural, all results on the basis of private and government schools, and so on. In educational studies, we can have these kind of sections. The only thing is that it should be clear. There should not be any hodgepodge. And in chapter 4, you please begin with the scheme or the layout of your chapter 4, that the following sections will be in this order. And then the reader is clear that if he wants to find what are the results of the regression analysis, one has to go to 4.7. Or if one wants to find the normalcy of the data, maybe section 4.1, and so on. So I come to the second part of my slide. The summary and conclusion section is the most widely used part of the report. Yes, in the present times, not many students, not many scholars spend time reading the whole report. They quickly flip to the last part because mostly the reports do not carry an abstract. If there is an abstract, good, but abstract runs into 2.5 pages. It doesn't give you much. So summary is the section where mostly readers will first go to find out what tools were used, what statistical techniques were used, and whether the findings are positive as gleaned from the topic, because topic is like a prism. The topic of the thesis is like a prism. And when a good researcher sees the topic, he can easily make out whether it is a descriptive research, an experimental research, or a historical research, and looks for findings accordingly. A question was asked regarding reference and bibliography, and here it is. The reference section contains the list of all sources of information used by you to study the problem and to also develop tools to follow a research methodology, and of course the reviews of various related researches. So yes, the details of the tools which were surveyed by you and actually used by you. So if they are standardized tools, the reference of the publishers and name of those tools should also come in your reference section. Bibliography is a long list of all that is relevant to the topic, and reference will be a little limited one where whatever you have actually referred to will come. So the reference section, if it is a comprehensive one, will contain the bibliography. Now, this we are talking about the third major part of your report, which is the last part, and again a very important part, where you are giving the references used by you both in print and the e-references from the electronic media in the APA format by the American Psychological Association. We use the latest format. I think the 7th version is yet to come out. It is available for purchase, but universities are not using it. So APA 6th version we are using nowadays, and mostly that referencing helps us to locate the author, locate the sources by the name of the author, the publisher, the name of the journal, volume number of the journal, and the names of the books. Also, unpublished theses are also mentioned in that, and the reference material from various websites giving the date of retrieval is mentioned in the bibliography section. The appendix section then is again numbered in small Roman numerals, and it will contain essentially the copies of questionnaires which you have used for your data collection. Essentially, I would say, because otherwise, how would I know as a reader of your research report that when you went to rural Bengal, were you using an English? A questionnaire in English by a foreign author, or did you translate it, or did you use the questionnaire with actually 60 items or no? So we need to put in the questionnaire or tools of our data collection, and if we have developed the report, if we have developed the questionnaire, then the drafts, at least the first draft and the final draft, should be there. Yes, I'm coming to that. We have to revise our draft report. There should not be a hurry in doing it. Usually the supervisors will agree with me that towards the end, the researcher is really at the end of his nerves and would like to either get married or is going for a job, and at that time is pursuing you to please complete the correction of the chapters. You're saying, please give me time. I require at least 2 days. I cannot return the report back to you in 2 days. So what you have to do is that, have we done all the sections? Have we presented information to support conclusion and recommendation? That would mean that I'm checking out that all my objectives have been fulfilled have been fulfilled, and the research report is actually telling what I have done. In my haste, I should not miss on giving information, because many a times half the thing the research reporter is just assuming that the reader will understand. But the questions are best known to the supervisor, because supervisor is in the process of guiding a number of research scholars and also reading a number of research reports. So one must show the report to the supervisor, also to a few other researchers and experts. Maybe if you are not good in a particular language, for language errors, and also regarding presentation, and maybe implications of your research can be better framed with the help of experts. So rest is self-explanatory. I think we are moving towards the end of the session. I will give you now the general rules for typing the research report, which was mentioned in the earlier slides. These are generally this is the rule of the thumb which works, but universities may vary in their specifications. Usually, like here it is written, material should be typed on one side of the paper. But in our university, we have gone in for saving the paper, and we emphasize it is a guideline. We do not accept a research report published on only one side of the paper. And the research report has to be published on both sides of the paper. And if I have to evaluate a research report, I usually send a recommendation, please save paper, print on both sides of the paper. The margins are mentioned here. All textual material should be double space. We follow that. Triple space between paragraphs and single space in quotations. Dividing the words at the end of the line should be avoided as far as possible. But nowadays, it is your typist or the computer formatting person who is well versed with all these things. If you are doing it yourself, do check the guidelines again, according to the agency to whom you are to submit the report. Key points for writing the report: please, please, please avoid plagiarism. The kind of softwares which are available for the so-called plagiarism check, actually check the similarity. It provides you a similarity index. How many words are similar? So plagiarism is actually you. You have to check that you are not copying from a thesis. If you are quoting somebody, you always give their reference. If you are actually quoting someone verbatim, then put it in inverted commas and so on. The guidelines are available. It's a totally another lecture on plagiarism. So follow proper academic ethics and do your work with honesty. The report should essentially contain objectives, major finding, conclusions, and recommendations, which should be clearly discussed with the supervisor and then put inside the report. Try not to fudge the findings in order to get desirable findings. Do not fudge the data so that you get, like, for example, I have not come across any study on the use of ICT which says that the lessons taught with the help of ICT gave poorer result than the conventional study. It is very difficult to, get hold of a single research which authentically says that the students got fed up with the ICT and they actually wanted a lively teacher to teach them, and that is why the teaching with ICT actually failed, and the students actually clamored for a face-to-face class. I think such results will emerge out of the pandemic, where we all are staring at the screen for most of the time. So finally, the research should necessarily meet guidelines of the funding authority or the university where it is to be submitted. It should be clear and concise. It should contain all the tables, graphs, pictures, maps, along with their titles and numbers correctly given. So the researcher, as a final check, should see that all the numbers and titles listed in the table of contents match with the actual pages and titles and numbers inside the body of the thesis. Thank you, everyone. I will stop sharing my screen and I'm open to your questions.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think this has been one of the most scholastic and edifying and informative sessions I have ever come across.
Really?
You have wonderfully spoken on how to write an effective research report. Ma'am has spoken to us about the systematic, comprehensive research writing process, the relevance of the topic, how report benefits the target group, prescribed formats of report, issues to be considered while preparing research reports, title page, abstract acknowledgement. Ma'am instructed us as to how to form guidelines for tables, body of the report, review literature, analysis, bibliography, and all the fields she has touched upon, which we as researchers need to know on social science research. Thank you so much, ma'am. And since ma'am herself has been addressing certain questions from the chat box, and I am really at a fix which question to choose and which to not, because ma'am, you have a plethora of questions. All the participants are questioning you and they are filling our chat box with applauds and accolades for what you have said. So ma'am, we are keeping it to the mail section. We will actually mail all their inquiries. We will contact you if necessary. We will learn the answers from you and we will contact them through mail. Thank you so much, ma'am. It had been a wonderful, heartening and a very scholarly session. A best way probably to end today's evening. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Upkatha. It was wonderful to interact long distance with all
Yes, ma'am.
people from the East.
Yes, ma'am. And one thing I also would like to add, which I forgot, that you also spoke about the present social condition, the pandemic, and how it is affecting the researchers. That was so innovative and so nice, ma'am. Keeping the present social scenario at point. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. I wish you all a pleasant evening. I think it's time for me to say bye. I would be happy to receive all the questions in my email, and I will email back the answers to you. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We'll reach you. We'll reach you soon. Thank you, ma'am. To all my dear participants, I know you are very eager to receive today's PPT and the YouTube uploading. We will be doing it as early as possible and at our earliest convenience. Thank you all of you for being a part. We have come to the end of the second day of our faculty development program. The schedule remains the same for the following days. Stay tuned for tomorrow's program too. Hope to see you all very soon. Thank you once again and have a good night's sleep. Thank you.
Thank you. End kori?
End করুন।